So, some big news coming out of the NFC East today. It has been reported that neither Nick Sirianni nor Mike McCarthy is going to lose their jobs, much to the chagrin of Eagles and Cowboys fans. I'm going to get into that, give you guys some of my reactions, some of my thoughts on the situation. Two very unique situations, I would say. It's not often that coaches with this level of success are just automatically just thrown to the fire by their fan bases. But again, two different organizations, two very, I would say, elite organizations in a lot of ways. But this is a interesting circumstance for these coaches. But before I give you guys my thoughts, if you guys are enjoying the channel, please don't forget to subscribe. I'm going to be making videos like crazy. And if you guys don't want to miss, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. So I'm going to tackle one coach at a time. Let's talk about Nick Sirianni. Nick Sirianni is, again, a very special case because Eagles fans were absolutely calling for his head after their playoff game against the Buccaneers, and for good reason. You know, they started the year 10-1. They looked like they were going to repeat as NFC champions, and then that San Francisco game just broke them. Like, they were just not – they just weren't the same team the rest of the year. Now, I think that you kind of have to take a step back, and you have to realize – who Nick Sirianni is. What is he as a coach, right? Because he is under the category of CEO head coach, right? And basically what that means is that he doesn't necessarily call the defense. He doesn't call the offense. He kind of sits back, lets his coordinators run their side of the ball. He manages the clock. He is the voice of reason for the team. And so he is not a major contributor into play calling, anything like that, right? And to be a CEO head coach, I think one of the most important qualifications is you have to have really good coordinators. Really good coordinators. I think a good example of that is Dan Campbell right now in Detroit, right? Ben Johnson is a phenomenal offensive coordinator. And that was appointed directly by Dan Campbell. So if he wants to step back and say, okay, Ben, you got the offense, it better be someone damn good. And in that case, it really is. And for the Eagles, last year it was, right? They had two really good coordinators last year. Shane Steichen on offense and Jonathan Gannon on defense, both who did a really, really good job. Both units were, elite last year, and they were a few plays away from being Super Bowl champions, right? Flash forward to the offseason. Both coordinators leave to go get head coaching jobs. Nick Sirianni is now the guy. He promotes a couple of guys from the organization. They bring in Sean Desai from Seattle. They bring in Matt Patricia, we'll get into that in a second. But again, if you're going to be a CEO or head coach, your job is, hey, we need good coordinators. You got to get us good coordinators. And that's, I think, fuck up number one from Nick Sirianni is Brian Johnson was not a good offensive coordinator, not even a little bit, right? And Sean Desai hired as defensive coordinator was bad, but then it was compounded with another bad mistake, bringing in Matt Patricia to run the defense, which they were arguably worse. I mean, they had no fight against the Buccaneers. They couldn't tackle. They couldn't cover. They were bumping into each other. It looked like a high school team out there. It was just dreadful, right? Add to that the fact that Shane Steichen goes to Indy, loses his quarterback for the whole year, and they're in the playoffs until the last, 2 minutes of their last game of the year, right, with Gardner Minshew starting the whole season. So Shane Steichen had a phenomenal year in Indy, and Jonathan Gannon, give him some credit for what he did in Arizona. They were not a very good team at all, and they were fighting, and they were feisty, right? So Nick Sirianni, there's the whole meme of, what does he do? Basically, right, that's kind of the antithesis of the problem with the Philadelphia Eagles right now. And I think another issue is just the way they went out. I mean, they went out like a wet noodle. Like it just didn't look like a team. This is, again, a team that started 10-1. They won 10 of their first 11 games, and they ended the year with 11 wins total. That is terrible, right? There were some very low moments of the season. You lost to Drew. I'm a Seahawks fan. You lost to Drew Lock on Monday Night Football, really? You lost to the Giants. You got fucking pantsed by the 49ers. Now, again, you lose to the 49ers. It's not necessarily an indictment on you, but they got fucking pantsed. I mean, that game was over, and that game was not even close. So, again, you look at it like that from that standpoint, and it is really disappointing. And the Eagles are an organization that have very high standards, right? Jeffrey Lurie is not a patient owner. He is not a guy that is going to let you have a few bad seasons and hope you can figure it out, right? He's not the Bears. Matt Eberflus has had 2 bad years in a row, and they're going to keep him for a 3rd year. If Matt Eberflus was the Eagles head coach, he'd have been fired on the plane home from half of their games, okay? I promise you. this is not an organization that waits on coaches. And so for Eagles fans who want Sirianni fired, obviously that is an emotionally charged reaction to a certain degree. But Jeffrey Lurie has proven that he is kind of an emotionally charged owner, right? Think about Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson fucking won a Super Bowl and was gone in 2 years. Chip Kelly had back-to-back, if I'm not mistaken, had back-to-back 10-win seasons and was replaced. So Andy Reid went to the playoffs every year, won 10 games every year, just couldn't win a Super Bowl. He's gone, right? One of the greatest coaches ever. So Jeffrey Lurie, I think, has a really quick trigger finger when it comes to firing head coaches. And I personally think that is a pretty good idea. Right, I don't think that you should settle for mediocrity. I think that you should always want to be the best and fire whoever doesn't get you there. Right. However, in the case of Nick Sirianni, I think it's a bit more complicated. Now, I was doing some research on this earlier, and I was wondering. I said, has there ever been a coach that the year before went to the Super Bowl and then got fired following that next season? And there is an instance of this. John Fox. John Fox was the Broncos coach in 2013 when they went to the Super Bowl against the Seattle Seahawks. Shout out my boys. Obviously, we know they got just demolished in that Super Bowl, but they made the Super Bowl. They were like one of the best offenses of all time. 2014, they lost in the divisional round. They didn't even make it to the AFC Championship game, and John Elway fired him. Now, the end result of that was the following year, Gary Kubiak stepped in to be the Broncos head coach. They won the Super Bowl the next year. So part of the thinking for John Elway was, hey, I didn't like the way we went out. He said he was quoted saying, I wanted to go out kicking and screaming. And he didn't feel like the players had the fight that was necessary for a Super Bowl winning team late in that season, in that divisional round. And I think the same argument can be made about Nick Sirianni, right? The Eagles, again, lost the Super Bowl last year, same as the Broncos. And they really went out on a terrible note this year, like really, really badly. So from that angle, you could see it. Now, I think that Broncos instance was a 1 in a million example. I mean, you had, in 2013, you had prime Peyton Manning, not so much in 2015, but you had Peyton Manning. You had one of the best defenses of our era. You had, studs all over the roster. I think the same can be said about the Philadelphia Eagles, obviously minus the Peyton Manning situation. And I think the other argument for firing Nick Sirianni is, hey, there's a lot of really good coaches available. Now, about a quarter of the league right now is looking to hire a new head coach, so you're going to be competing with a lot of teams. But I honestly think if Nick Sirianni was fired today, the Eagles are the best job available. And if I'm Bill Belichick, if I'm Mike Vrabel, if I'm Ben Johnson, I would want that Philadelphia Eagles job. Who wouldn't, right? I mean, the talent-wise, they're such a amazing roster. And I think that speaks to a lot of the frustration that lies with Eagles fans of saying, like, hey, we have a great team. We've got a lot of really good players. Why are we losing 32-9 to Baker fucking Mayfield in the wild card round, right? That's the point of contention, and I completely understand that. But again, you fire Nick Sirianni. I think the Eagles are the best job available. Now, to defend Nick Sirianni and to give him, I guess, the benefit of the doubt, he did not make good hires this year at coordinator. So I think if you're him or if you're in his camp, you say, hey, we fucked up the coordinators. We'll get it right this offseason, and we'll be back to dominating the way we were, right? And I think that there is a somewhat logical argument to be made that could be the case, right? But is another Shane Steichen walking through that door? Is a Jonathan Gannon walking through that door? Because, again, both units regressed significantly, losing those guys. Those guys are, both head coaches right now. Both units regressed significantly. And the other downside is, and, John Schneider, GM for the Seahawks, did a press conference earlier this week, and he made this point. I think it's interesting. Hey, if you get a really good offensive coordinator, that's awesome. He's going to get taken by another team. He's going to go get a head coaching job. So to keep cycling out coordinators, I think is a tiring process. More so offensive coordinators than I think defensive coordinators. But to keep cycling through offensive coordinators, because maybe the next Shane Steichen does come. Maybe he's, Shane Waldron, let's just say. Shane Waldron comes to Philly, is awesome. The offense is clicking. Well, after 2 years, Shane Waldron's going to go get a head coaching job. So it's really hard when your head coach isn't, running one side of the ball in particular. especially I think the offense, which Nick Sirianni is an offensive guy. I'm not saying he doesn't do anything. I'm saying when you're not the primary like play caller, play designer like Brian Johnson is and like Shane Steichen was, it becomes a little bit more difficult to prove your worth, I guess, on your side of the ball. So for Nick Sirianni, I think that Eagles fans are fed up. They even even winning 11 games. I think this is the worst 11-win season that you could possibly have, and they're fed up. And truthfully, I don't blame them. I will say though, however, there are a lot of teams that would cut off their right arm to have a Super Bowl loss followed by an 11-win season. There are a lot of teams that is a really, really successful stretch of seasons for them. But the Philadelphia Eagles are a high-quality organization. Like, they will not accept, mediocrity. They will not accept going, 1-5 in their last 6 games and losing in the wild card round. That's not something that they accept. And hats off to them. But it does sound like Nick Sirianni is staying. He's going to get another year. Again, I think priority number one for him has to be get the coordinators right, get a good offensive guy in there, get a good defensive coordinator, and hopefully you can just kind of let your roster, the talent of your roster, carry to success. Now let's transition to Mike McCarthy. And again, another very interesting case of a very, I don't want to say high quality because I don't want to gas up Cowboys fans, but a very, let's say, a big brand in Dallas, a big organization, right? Jerry Jones is probably the most popular owner in all of sports, I would argue. And for Mike McCarthy, back to back 12-win seasons. Again, there are a lot of teams in the NFL that would kill to have 36 wins in 3 years. That is no small feat, right? The problem with Mike McCarthy is that the playoff success has not been there. And that was, I think, his demise towards the end of his tenure in Green Bay was, hey, man, we give you Aaron Rodgers and you can't win us playoff games. Like, we're supposed to be going to the Super Bowl every year, and we can't even get past the divisional round. We can't get past, there was some epic collapses like the 2014 NFC Championship game against Seattle. Like, a lot of stains on Mike McCarthy's resume are indicative of his lack of playoff success. And, he's come to Dallas, and originally he was paired up with Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore left this offseason to go be the Chargers offensive coordinator, and throughout the regular season, I thought he did a pretty good job. Dak Prescott, I think, had the best year of his career, and that was without a very consistent running game, right? Tony Pollard was not the guy that I thought he was going to be, and CeeDee Lamb was absolutely amazing. Jake Ferguson popped off. Brandon Cooks, probably the halfway point in the season on, was really, really good. Mike McCarthy had this offense in a good position, and again, he is the offensive guy. He's calling the plays. He's scheming. Dan Quinn is running the defensive side, and his unit was good. But then you get to the playoffs and you win your division. You host a playoff game. You're hosting the 7-seed Green Bay Packers, the youngest team in the history of the NFL playoffs, and you get fucking smoked. Like, that was bad. It wasn't the 16-point loss you think it was. That was really like a 24, 27-point loss with some garbage time yards and points from Dallas. Green Bay looked better coached. They looked like they were schemed better. They looked like they were the team that won the division hosting the 7 seed, right? That was just embarrassing. And again, Green Bay's not a bad team. Jordan Love is actually really good if we're being honest, but Green Bay's not a bad team, but the standard in Dallas should be much higher than get blown out by the 7 seed in the wild card round at home, right? And if you're Cowboys fans, again, in 3 years you've won one playoff game. That was against literally the last game of Tom Brady's career, right? You've gotten punched in the mouth by San Francisco back-to-back years, and then you get punched in the mouth by Green Bay and Jordan Love. And that's embarrassing. That really is embarrassing. And unlike Nick Sirianni, he can't really use the excuse of, well, my coordinator sucked. Dan Quinn is a pretty good defensive coordinator. I actually would have said he was really good, but again, his defense didn't really show up. And McCarthy runs the offense. He's got nobody to blame but himself for what happened in Green Bay. He is the play caller. He is the play designer. He is the scheme guy. And again, I think that I'm going to put a pin in this for a second and just get an overall theme of Jerry Jones is getting older. And I think every single year we get removed away from 1995, which was the last time the Cowboys won the Super Bowl. We're we're closing in on 30 years here. Every year, I think he gets more and more and more impatient. And I would be very surprised if the Cowboys do not at least make the NFC Championship game next year if McCarthy isn't fired. Because I think Jerry Jones is fed up. I think he thinks, and I don't blame him, that this is a Super Bowl caliber roster with Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons and Trayvon Diggs when he comes back and is healthy, and that this team is better or should be better than maximum going to the divisional round. That shouldn't be the case in Dallas. And again, Jerry Jones has seen a lot of Super Bowls. He's seen 3 Super Bowls as the owner of the Dallas Cowboys. He knows what it looks like to go to the Super Bowl. Now, he hasn't seen that in 30 years, but I think since Jimmy Johnson left, he has really looked for that coach that really brings the team together and makes them an elite unit. Because I understand Barry Switzer won the one in 1995, but that was Jimmy's team that Barry just kind of inherited. They won that year, and then the wheels kind of fell off after that. But Jason Garrett, he held on to Jason Garrett way too long. Never had success with Jason Garrett. Mike McCarthy, I think he's doing the same thing. And I think Cowboys fans want McCarthy gone. I don't think that's a reactionary thing, although Cowboys fans can be very emotional. Skip Bayless. I don't think that that's an emotional thing because, again, where are you going with Mike McCarthy? He's having the same problems in Dallas that he had in Green Bay. So I understand the frustration. I understand the pause to welcome him back with open arms this year. And again, if he doesn't win probably at least 2 playoff games next year, I'd kick him. I'd probably kick him out right now. Again, you don't think if Mike McCarthy got fired, a lot of coaches would really, really want that Dallas Cowboys job? I mean, come on, Bill Belichick would be the first call. If I'm Jerry Jones, if you don't think Jerry Jones could lure Bill Belichick to Dallas? I mean, that would be unfucking real if Bill Belichick would go to Dallas, right? Mike Vrabel would be an upgrade. Maybe you can poach Mike Tomlin of the Steelers. Who knows? But again, there are coaching upgrades available, and I think that's the frustrating thing if you're a Cowboys fan is saying, we can do better. There are guys out there that need jobs that are better. And can we win playoff games with Mike McCarthy? Something Mike McCarthy hasn't had a deep playoff run since 2014 with the NFC Championship game with the total collapse, right? And that Packers team was just unreal loaded. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on Mike McCarthy and Nick Sirianni retaining their jobs as head coach. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I'm very interested to hear your theory. Hope you guys enjoyed this quick little rant, thesis, analysis, whatever it is. Hope you guys enjoyed. Please don't forget to subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Peace out.